I'm going to try this clicker. I have a backup clicker if this clicker doesn't work. How y'all doing? Good. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Colin, for the super flattering intro. And thank you to Kristen and Alicia and the Creative Mornings team. This is a real honor for me to get to do this. Thank you guys for coming. So, okay, thank yous out of the way. This is what I'm going to talk about today. It's a random weirdo list of stuff, and I'm going to try somehow to weave all of that stuff together in a way where I get to talk about a couple different things. One is me. I got to give you some background on who I am. I want to talk a little bit about my business, the Skillery, and what it's all about. And I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and kind of what I see happening out in the world. So I'm going to do all of that underneath this theme of transparency. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what does that mean, how do you touch on the topic of transparency, and I'm going to do it by being totally transparent with you along the way. But for me, transparency is really about the fact that you cannot hide from reality, right? So just don't even try. That's what transparency is for me. So I'm going to try to weave that through my talk, and then we'll leave a little bit of time for questions at the end. Is that cool? Okay. So I need you to know a few things about me. First, I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a former Ghostbuster. This is a true story. At the age of 7, I started my first business. I went around the neighborhood and I hung up signs on telephone poles advertising my services as a Ghostbuster. I put my phone number on there. I don't know what my parents were thinking, letting me do that. This is me as a Ghostbuster. It's a true story. I really don't. I don't know what my parents were thinking, letting me do this. I guess this was like a different era. This was in the 80s. I don't think anyone called for me to come and bust their ghost. I don't think that happened. Terrible business number one. Certainly not the last. Here's the second. About a year later, my brother and I got a really, I'll call it a great idea, but it wasn't, a great idea for a business. Do you guys remember these? We were Garbage Pail Kids, right? So these were huge in the 80s. I mean, massively huge. They were like playing cards and stickers, and you could trade them, and they had pictures of kids getting killed and looking awful. My brother and I decided that we were going to create a wholesome, family-friendly competitor to the Garbage Pail Kids called the Apple Pie Kids. I can't make this shit up. We really did this. This is actually me and my brother. This is me and my brother there painting a sign that we were going to hang in our school. We were going to hang it above this table where we'd sell Apple Pie Kids to all of our friends. And then this is a newspaper article. I have to read this to you. It's so embarrassing. So here's what it says. It says, the Garbage Pail Kids cards feature hairy, beer-guzzling, or beheaded likenesses of the Cabbage Patch Kids with names such as Brutal Bridget and Acne Amy. Wait for it. The Apple Pie Kids drawings are of healthy-looking children in pleasant surroundings. They include Smart Art, Neat Pete, and my favorite, Good Grade Gary. I just did this. This was a thing I did. This is a picture. This is thoughtful Theo. This is an actual Apple Pie Kid, right from the 80s. This is physically fit Phil. He's got Nike written on his shoes. He had like a marketing deal with him. This is Shy Sai. It's on lined paper. We couldn't even get real paper. It's embarrassing. So I tell you this in the full spirit of transparency, right? I've had some really terrible business ideas. I've run some really bad businesses as a little kid, and quite possibly as an adult too. I also tell you this to point out that I'm an entrepreneur. I've always had this entrepreneurial bug, this spirit inside me from when I was a little kid. And I don't really know where it comes from. My parents were not like that. My parents worked in education. They still work in education their entire lives. They kind of grew up in an era where you go to college, and then you have a career, and then you retire, and then you die. Right? That's kind of the mentality that they grew up with. I did not grow up with that mentality. That was not the structure I had set up for myself in my life. I did go to college. I did that. I have an undergraduate degree in theater from Northwestern University. I have a master's degree in teacher leadership. I have teaching certification. Like, I am highly employable. But I didn't go out and get a normal job. My path looked more like that. Sort of crazy. I did a couple of normal things along the way, right? So I was an actor for a while. I worked in event production. I was a teacher. I did a couple of normal things, but I also did a couple of not normal things. I drove trolleys around the city of Chicago. And I worked for Saturday Night Live, and I worked for the Jerry Springer Show, and I started my own business, and all of these kind of weird things mixed in along the way. It's a weird, not linear path. And I think it's a weird path that is actually a little bit more akin to what people are experiencing now. And I think young people today are experiencing more jobs in their lifetime than a previous generation. I think they're staying in jobs for less time than a previous generation. And I think a lot of young people are somewhere along the way considering entrepreneurship. And they're considering starting their own thing. We're seeing this more and more now. I think there's been a real swell in the last 5 to 10 years in people starting their own thing and trying to work for themselves. And I'm curious about why. Why has there been this swell in entrepreneurship? I have some theories. One has to do with the recession. Right? I think when the economy tanked in 2008, it took a lot of jobs with it. And so you had a lot of people graduating from college or coming out of high school or wherever, and they didn't have a job. And so they had to try to craft some kind of way to do the work on their own, to work for themselves. I think that's a big factor. I also think for whatever reason, entrepreneurship is hot. It's just sexy. We're making movies about Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg, he's a nerd, right? He's a nerd and he started a business and we're going to make movies about him. Steve Jobs, people talk about Steve Jobs the way that I remember people talking about Michael Jordan. Sports figures, movie stars, musicians, right? We still sort of idolize those people as a culture, but we've also added in nerds and entrepreneurs and business owners. I think that's new. The other reason I think entrepreneurship has been so hot is that there's really never been a better time to start something. Right? We have tools and resources at our disposal now that we just didn't have 10 years ago. You want to take somebody's money, you just stick a thing into your phone and swipe their credit card. That's crazy. You want to build a website, you can go home today, you can build a website and have it up and running by this afternoon, and it'll look really, really good. That's new. I don't think that was the case a while back. So what it's doing is it is creating a workforce of people who are taking work on themselves, this independent workforce, right? We've seen a huge, huge rise in the independent workforce. In 2014, there were 14.5 million people that were independent workers, self-employed people. And that number jumped by 1 million people in the next year. What's crazy to me is that by 2020, most people are predicting that there will be 60 million independent workers in the United States. That's 40% of the American workforce, which is a crazy number of people, right? Crazy number. So who are these people? Right? They are freelancers. They are graphic designers. They are web developers. They are consultants. They are coaches. They are event planners. They are entrepreneurs, right? Is this anybody in this room? Probably. I figure there's probably a few people. In my mind, this group of people, this is the future of the American workforce. No question, right? So I believe that we have an obligation to support this group. I think we have an obligation to do a couple things. First, I think we've got to train this group. We have to train this group, not just in their particular field, right? So a graphic designer, there's lots of places to go get training in graphic design, but we have to train a graphic designer to be a business owner. That's a different thing, right? We have to provide some business training for this group. And I think we need to create organizations and institutions that support this type of entrepreneur. There's a lot of institutions out there if you want to go build something really, really big, something investable, something scalable. But there aren't as many institutions out there to support people who are trying to build something that is inherently a little small. I think we need more of those. Lastly, I think we need to find new ways to advocate for and support these types of entrepreneurs. I get asked a lot in my business, what's the economic impact of your business? I'm like, I don't know how to answer that. Like, how many jobs we created? 3. I don't know. How much money do we pump into the economy? None. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, right? But I know somewhere in my head that something we're doing is good for the city, or it's good for our neighborhood, or it's good for our block, or it's good for the 30 people that work there every day. Right? I know there's a value in what we're doing. I just don't know how to quantify that. So I think we have an obligation to find new ways to talk about the value that small businesses and entrepreneurs and independent professionals bring to a community. I think this is my calling. Like, I think somewhere in all of this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I built a business over the last couple of years in the Skillery that does those things. We are a home for and a training center for and an advocate for these types of small independent professionals. People who are trying to build something that may not ever scale, that may not grow really, really large, but that they find satisfying and meaningful and fun. And I think that's important. So I want to talk a little bit about how the Skillery came to be. I mentioned that I was a teacher, and one of the things that I taught was 8th graders. I taught 8th grade math. Those are not my students. My students were far more engaged than that. The 8th graders love to raise their hand and ask the question, Mr. Dudley, why do we have to learn this? Right? Remember that question? And it's actually a great question, right? Teachers hate it, but it's a great question, and I'm super glad that my students would ask that sort of question. And sometimes I could really answer them with a great answer. I could say something like, well, we have to learn about interest rates because in 3 years, when you want to go buy a car, you're going to need to understand this. And they'd all sit up, right? They'd like, okay, we're in, let's do it. But sometimes I had a different answer I had to give. Sometimes I'd have to say something like, well, you have to learn the quadratic formula because it is on the test, or it's something you need to know in high school, or it's somebody told me you need to know it. I didn't have an answer. And that sucked. I hated that. Yes, I was being transparent with them. Yes, I was being honest with them. But I didn't like the answer. And it caused me to realize 2 things. One, I think something is wrong with the institution of education. We're asking kids to learn things that I don't think they necessarily need to know. That is a creative mornings talk for another time. But the thing that it made me realize that I think is relevant to this is that I was not okay teaching if that was the best answer that I could give. If I couldn't draw a connection between what I was teaching and the relevance in the real world, I wasn't okay with that. It was kind of the first moment when I stopped and said, this doesn't feel right to me. My job doesn't feel right. And I didn't come to that realization until I was transparent with my kids. When I was transparent with my students, it helped me realize something about myself. I think that's one of the things that transparency has the power to do. And so I did what anyone would do in that scenario. I quit. I quit at the end of a school year. I didn't walk out. But I quit. I left teaching after almost a decade. And I was lost. I was really, really lost. I didn't know what to do. My wife was pregnant with our first kid. I was depressed. I've never been depressed before, and I've never been depressed since, but in that moment, I got depressed. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't know whether I was going to go get a job. And there was this little voice in the back of my head that was like, dude, you should start a business. I was like, doing what? Ghost busting again? I didn't know what I should do, right? And I have since learned that this is a moment that's pretty common for a lot of people who want to start a business. This moment of, I feel like I should do something, but I'm not quite sure what step to take. And there's a couple different paths that I see people take. One path is that I'd spend some time coming up with a really great business idea. Right? Something that solves a problem for people, something that has a huge market and that's going to have great margins. It's going to be a really, really great business idea. And to that business idea, I'm going to bring everything I got. I'm going to bring my skills, I'm going to bring my talents, I'm going to bring my energy, I'm going to bring my enthusiasm, I'm going to bring it all. And I'm going to find people around me who are going to join my team and do the same thing with me. And we're going to get just a little bit of money, and we're going to prove that it works, and then we're going to blow it up, and it's going to be amazing. That's one route. It is not the route that I took. Instead of looking for a really great business idea, I went looking for myself. I started asking questions like, what am I interested in? Where do my passions lie? What's interesting to me? What resources do I have at my disposal? Do I have any money? Do I have any time to start a business? I have a laptop. Can I do something with that? And somewhere in all of these answers, is there a business idea? Is there something that someone would be willing to give me money for? Somewhere in all of that? These are wildly different approaches to thinking about starting a business. I think for the folks on the right, the idea is that you want to create a business that works, right? And maybe for me and other folks like me who exist more on the left here, I think maybe it's about creating a life that works. These are different approaches to starting a business. At the Skillery, one of the things that we do when someone comes in and they're kind of in this spot, they may take a workshop with us, and I ask people in that workshop to actually come up with their idea for success. Be transparent with the group. What does your idea of success look like? And I actually want people to draw it. I hand them crayons, I hand them colored pencils, and I say, draw me your idea of success. And this is a wildly eye-opening moment for people. Some people, the drawings kind of end up in 2 camps. Some people will draw a picture of themselves standing on top of a pile of money with like a Corvette over here, and like a chateau over here, and like a cigarette or something like that. I call it the Scrooge McDuck picture, right? This is their idea of success, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's great. But there's another kind of picture that some people draw, and it's what I call the kids and sunshine picture. And it's usually a picture of the entrepreneur standing there with like their spouse and some children and a dog and a Honda Civic and like a little craftsman-style house, their Los Tacos, and it's summer, right? They're drawing happiness, right? That's what they're drawing a picture of, and it's not about money. It's about happiness. These are two wildly different versions of what success means. Neither is more correct or incorrect. They're just really different. And asking people to be transparent at the start of their entrepreneurial journey about what their version of success is causes them to go down the path a little bit differently. Don't get me wrong, I think a successful business has a couple of things that it absolutely must be, right? It must be profitable. You gotta make a widget for $1 and sell it for $2. You gotta be able to do that over some period of time. If you sell it for $2 today, you better sell it for $2 next week and next month. And it has to be feasible for you to do that. You have to be able to make the widget, find people to buy it, et cetera, right? Like, you gotta have this stuff if your business is gonna be successful. But for some people, there is another layer about the quantity of money. And for some people, there is another layer about the quality of life. And that's not to say you can't want a lot of money and also want a good quality of life, or that you can't want a good quality of life and also want a lot of money. But that why is really, really different, right? I'm talking about entrepreneurs like there are two of them, and there are obviously a lot of different types of entrepreneurs. I usually talk about it on a bit of a spectrum. So in my mind, one type of entrepreneur on one side of that spectrum is trying to build something high growth, huge, investable, scalable, a really big business. Right? And on the other side of the spectrum, you have people who are doing something that I call salary replacement. These are folks who might have a 9-to-5 job, and they'd be really, really happy to just replace the salary from that 9-to-5 job with money that is generated by themselves doing something they're really excited about. And there's probably a group in the middle, I don't know what to call them, like a slow wealth creation group. Folks who maybe want to build something that grows but slowly over time, but maybe they're not interested in like going crazy. So a real quick example, let's take the world of coffee shops for a second. What would be like high growth, investable, scalable coffee shop? Starbucks, right? Like super easy. What would be over there? Say again? A coffee cart? Maybe? Yeah. I think of like Eighth and Roast or Ugly Mugs in East Nashville. I think of like local coffee shops that have a location and they're doing fine, but that's all they have, versus something in the middle which would be more like what? Barista parlor, maybe, even Frothy, right? Places that have added a couple locations, Frothy's added a bakery and a roastery. Like, there's clearly some desire to grow, but they're not trying to be Starbucks, I don't think. Then off this spectrum to the left are the people who are doing hobbies, right? These are people who have, something going on the side, and they have a little bit of money coming in from it, but it's not really a business. And there's nothing wrong with a hobby that makes some money, but it's a hobby. And the Skillery is kind of somewhere in between. It's not quite at salary replacement. And I was a middle school math teacher, so it tells you what it is. It's true. It's true, and you can see it in the numbers, right? I look at these numbers all the time. It's not a very good business. It's just not. One day I was looking at this spreadsheet and I thought, I wonder if it would be helpful, in the spirit of trying to help other entrepreneurs, I wonder if it would be helpful to like put this out in the world and let other people look at this. I didn't know if it would. So we did. We put it online, as Colin mentioned. We put all of our financial information up there. You can go to our website. You can see all our revenue, all our expenses. We try to make sense of it. We try to put graphs and charts and context and all kinds of stuff about how we're doing as a business. And we hear all the time from people who are thrilled that we did this because it's useful to them to be able to see how another business operates. So awesome. I want to talk about a couple of pieces of this data. Without getting too nerdy and without getting into too many numbers, but I want to talk about a few pieces of data, and I'm going to have to back up to talk a little bit about what the Skillery is, because some of you may not actually know, and that's fine. We started out 5 years ago as a marketplace for classes and workshops, and that's all we did. We did classes and workshops all over Nashville on all kinds of different subjects. This is actually our first workshop ever. This is Katie Gonzalez. She makes books. She's a bookbinder. She taught our first workshop. It was a success. We added a couple more workshops. They were a success. And over the course of a few years, we did 500 classes on all kinds of different subjects. From bookbinding to whiskey tasting to how to build a house out of recycled tires, I mean, all kinds of stuff. And the response was amazing, right? The response from the community was, this is great, we're so glad this exists in Nashville, thank you so much. When can I teach this class? When are you guys going to offer this class? We're so glad this is here. How do I bring this to Cincinnati? Right? Huge, huge support. And the business sucked. The business sucked. Here's proof, the business sucked. This is class revenue month by month for 5 years. And you can see it's wildly up and down. There are months we're doing fine, and then there are months we don't make any money. You can't run a business like that. My expenses were not up and down. My expenses were like here. I had to pay for things whether there was money coming in or not. Not a good business. How's that for some transparency? So I made a decision that we needed another revenue stream. Right? And so we started exploring this idea of opening a space that could serve as a home for our classes at night, but also maybe get used in another way during the day that could bring in some money. And so a co-working space came to mind. And this is it. We opened a 7,000 square foot co-working space in Germantown. It's a fun, laid-back, easygoing space, and the people that work there, many of whom are here, are really terrific. And the really nice thing about opening a co-working space is that it is better money. Right? So if I take our class revenue and then I layer on top of it our co-working revenue, you can see it's a little bit of a better picture. Right? It's more steady, it's more money, it's a better picture. And so it made me ask this hard question: why are we doing classes? Should we just kill them? Right? They're not making us money, they're a ton of work, but they're really close to my heart. They're something I really care about. I have a background in education. I started the Skillery because I wanted people to be able to teach and learn what they want to teach and learn, the way that my 8th graders could have. But the business just didn't make sense, so we killed it. About a year ago, we decided we're not going to do any classes and workshops anymore, and what did we do? We decided to be fully transparent about why. So we wrote a really long blog post about it. The title of the blog post was, After 4 years, we were mostly ditching classes and workshops, and here's why. Super, super transparent, right? And it's long, and it's complicated, and it talks about all kinds of detail. And I'll be honest with you, we wrote this blog post because I knew we were going to get questions from people like, hey, what happened to your classes? Where are your bookbinding workshops? Where are your whiskey tastings? That's honesty about why we did this. What I didn't see coming was that the press was going to pick it up, that we were going to get emails from places offering classes and workshops and co-working spaces all over the country and all over the world talking about this decision, asking us about this decision. I didn't know that the day we released that blog post was going to be the busiest day on our website in the 5 years of our existence. I had no idea. It made me realize that being transparent with people has unexpected and unintended consequences. I like to think that people were interested in that topic, not for the voyeurism of business struggling, but because there's something really raw and refreshing about a business talking about what sucks in their business. I think most people tend to operate a little more closed off than that, a little more guarded, a little more protective of the dirty laundry. That's just not who I am. It's not the business that I want to run, so we don't do that. And I think there's something about that that's really refreshing, I think. So co-working is not our only revenue stream. We have a couple others. We do teach this workshop that I mentioned before. It's a one-day workshop called Introduction to Entrepreneurship, and we offer it a couple times a year, and we've offered it in a few places around the country as well. And then we have this thing called a starter kit that we created, which has some tools and resources for entrepreneurs, for people who want to sort of take it home. And these are both intended for people who are at that point where they have something they want to pursue, and they're not quite sure what to do about it. They're not quite sure what step to take. That's why we built these. And revenue-wise, it's pretty good. When you combine them with the co-working space, like, top-line revenue is okay. We're doing fine. There's enough money coming in. There's also a fair amount of money going out, right? Owning a co-working space that is 7,000 square feet, you gotta clean it, you gotta heat it, like there's a lot of expenses. And so when you combine those two things and you start to put together profit, it's not that pretty a picture. Especially when you look at what it means to break even. That's it, right? Sometimes we're above it, sometimes we're below it. It's a small business, not a very good business. It's a small business. And if I have to think about one reason why my business is small, it's this. Those people. Those are my kids. Those are my two little startups. That is one of them, and that's Elliot over there. And they're hugely important to me, right? They're hugely important to me at every minute of every day, but they're also hugely important to my business. I make business decisions with them in mind all the time. And those business decisions keep my business small. My business isn't small because I have kids. My business is small because I make a deliberate attempt to keep it small so that I can be a good dad. Sometimes people ask if I want to expand to another city, and I think, do I want to get on an airplane? I really don't. I took another full-time job about a year ago because I wanted my wife to have more time and ability to be at home with our kids. And I make decisions all the time to keep my business small. But I'm still an entrepreneur. Even though my business isn't going to scale, even though my business isn't going to grow really big, I'm still an entrepreneur. When aspiring entrepreneurs walk into the Skillery, I always tell them to consider the constraints that they have on their own life. And think about the impact that that's going to have on creating a business. Because I really believe that at the heart of every business, there is an entrepreneur. But at the heart of every entrepreneur may lie something other than the business. Business isn't everything. That's okay. I love the Skillery. I love what we've created over the last couple of years. I love the people that I've gotten to work with. I love the community that has sprung up around us. It's something that's really near and dear to my heart. But I can't hide from the reality that it is a small, struggling business that doesn't make a lot of money. I can't hide from the reality that every minute I spend working on my business is a minute I'm not spending with my kids. I can't hide from the reality that I don't know if the Skillery will be around in 3 months, in 6 months, or in a year. What comes next for the Skillery, I really have no idea. But I know that as long as we stay true to who we are and the business we want to create, and I know as long as we continue to create value for the people that walk in the front door, and I know that as long as we continue to be transparent with people about the successes and the challenges of running a small business, I know that we'll be fine, no matter what happens. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Questions. That's what I'm supposed to do now, right? Questions? I put on the purple question slide. And yeah.
Do you think your transparency sometimes, or this uncertainty, is scary to people who want to come to the business? Because like you said, you're not even sure if you're going to be around.
Yeah.
And how do you balance the transparency with confidence to spread to your clients?
That's an awesome question. Did y'all hear that question? It's about whether I think the transparency that I put out into the world about my business struggling might be scary to people who come into my business wanting to start a business. Totally fair question. We're out of time, so. No, it's a really good question. I think it probably is, and I think there are a lot of people that walk into the Skillery thinking it is something it isn't, and I think us peeling back the curtain and thinking, no, it's actually a bit of a fuck show in here. I think it helps set the tone of, let's talk about starting a business as what it really is. It's hard. And no matter what you put on Instagram, no matter what you put on Twitter, no matter what other people might think of your business is its own reality, and there is no hiding from it. I'd like to say that when I teach the entrepreneurship workshops that I teach, that a successful outcome of that workshop in my mind is that there will be people at the end who say, this is not for me. Thank you for the day, thank you for the lunch, this was $150 and 8 hours of my life, I'm going to go back to my other life now. That to me is a total success. That to me says we're not just selling the Kool-Aid of entrepreneurship, we're actually helping people understand what's involved to let them make a decision about whether it's right for them or not. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, I think we do scare some people off, and I think that's great. Yeah?
I'd ask the same question as it relates to your employees who work with your
they're here, so I just send you over there. You can shoot me down back there, but this is an observation. I think it does instill a little bit of fear. Yeah, I think it does instill a little bit of like, we don't know what's coming next. I mean, they know I have to sign a renewal on the lease on February 1st, or I don't. So I think they know that, and they know that there's a chance they'll shut it down. I don't know a better approach to that other than to bring them into the fold on those decisions, to include them in everything that I know and every conversation I'm having about it, so that maybe the reality trumps the fear. Maybe. I don't know a better approach to that. They're totally in the back So Michaela is who I'm referring to, she's back there. Michaela is back there and has a couple of the starter kits that I mentioned. If you want to go talk to Michaela about the Skillery or about the starter kits and flip through, you can do that. And by all means, ask her. Does Dudley scare the daylights out of you when he talks about it? Yeah.
I was just wondering if you had partnered with any other organizations like the Entrepreneur Center, or, are you in competition with them, or are you in collaboration? Is that something that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We partner with people all the time. I don't view us as a competitor to anybody, and I don't mean that because we're on an island by ourselves. I don't mean that. I think there are roles for all of the organizations that have sprung up in Nashville to help in this world. There are people that walk in our door that are not a good fit for us, and we absolutely send them somewhere else. I don't work for the Entrepreneur Center, but my guess is there are people that walk in their front door and they're thinking the same thing. I think as time has gone on and they have gotten a little surer footing of who they are and what role they want to serve, I feel like they've become more agreeable to kind of sending those people to other resources in town. I think, again, it's my perception, but I feel like in the early days it was kind of like, no, we're going to do this for everybody. And now they're kind of realizing, actually, we're really good at this, but let's not focus on this. And maybe there are other organizations, the Chamber of Commerce, the Skillery, other places in town that can handle some of this. So I'm constantly nurturing relationships with other organizations in town, not just because I want them to send people our way, but because I want to have the right resources and the right places to send other people who aren't a good fit for what we do. People outgrow us all the time. So it's really great to be in a city where we now have other places that we can send people. So, yeah.
Is your goal to break even, or do you intend or want to make business changes that would make your business more profitable, or is your family constraining that? I'm curious what your ultimate goal would be for this story.
I realize I didn't repeat these questions. I'm sorry. I'm going to repeat that one. Was my ultimate goal to break even? Is my ultimate goal to grow it really big? Is to support my family? What's my ultimate goal? I remember somebody asking me that question in the early days of the Skillery when it was just classes and workshops. And they said, how big do you want this thing to be? And I was like, intergalactic. I want it to be huge, right? What I realized along the way was that the only way for me to scale a business about classes and workshops was to do one of two things. Either create Skilleries all over the fucking place. Skillery Atlanta, the Skillery Cleveland, etc. I had no interest in that at all. Or put the classes online and let people pay for them and buy them online. And I had no interest in that at all. So I came to this point where I had to make a decision, and I had to say, do I want to go down a road where I'm going to grow this thing and make it big, but it's not going to be really the business I want? Or do I want to go down this road where I keep it small, profitable, sustainable, but small, but it's a business that's a little truer to my heart? And I chose this path. That path would have been fine. It's not a bad path. It's just not the path for me. So going down this path, I think, inherently means my hands are a little bit tied. The Skillery is only going to be so big. I would love it to be a little bigger than it is. I would love to pay people more. I would love for them to not feel like they could lose their job in February. I would love to be able to say to my wife, it's going to be totally great, and mean it. But I don't need to make a lot of money doing it. That's just not how I'm hardwired. That's just not what is most important to me. Yeah.
Can you reference some other new businesses, entrepreneurs that you're inspired by / influences that keep you, keep you going, motivated?
Can I think of other entrepreneurs who keep me motivated and keep me inspired? I really can. I'm just kidding. Yes, totally can. And they're all in the Skillery. I don't mean to make that like a sort of corny answer, but it's really true. I walk in there and I see people who are doing the kind of work that resonates with me, right? Working for themselves, making it work for themselves, by themselves, connecting with other entrepreneurs to help themselves like that. Those are the kind of people I want to surround myself with. I think that's why I built a business where they could kind of all come together and hang out. So as a small example, I'm going to call Kristen out. So Kristen is somewhere back there. You can find her. She's wearing a hat and blue shirt back there. She runs Creative Mornings. She's a Skillery member, and she runs a company called Beardition, which sells products for hairy people. And I have tremendous respect for the variety of things that Kristen does, the fact that she's able to to eat and make it all work together. The fact that she can pull off stuff like this. Like I have tremendous respect for people like that. Here you go, Chris. Yeah.
Do you think entrepreneur, like, being an entrepreneur discriminates between, like, people who have family and people who don't? Like,
Yes.
that's a big decision to
Yeah.
make.
Huge.
And if you can work 24/7 on your business, you can grow it and
Totally.
grow your stuff, or, like,
I don't have I have constraints that your average 22-year-old doesn't have. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yeah.
Andrew's asking a question about whether, as a parent, it's kind of a different path to entrepreneurship or a different set of constraints than people who aren't parents. I think hugely. I have never started a business when I wasn't a parent, so I can't totally speak to that. But I know the constraints that I face as a result of having kids are enormous. And maybe constraint is the right word. I was thinking maybe it wasn't, but it is. It is a constraint. I think having kids just changes your life in ways you can't ever imagine. Somebody described it to me when we were pregnant as it's like walking through a door that disappears behind you. Oh, that's terrifying. And now it's totally accurate. It's 100% accurate. So what does entrepreneurship look like behind the door? I have no idea. I only know this version of it, and it's hard. It's super hard.
yeah, if hindsight 2020, do you ever wish that, like, you had thought of the Skillery, like, 5 years earlier? Like, was that ever, like, a thing?
No, I don't ever wish that I thought of the Skillery 5 years earlier. First of all, I don't think I could have thought of it or would have thought of it. It came out of that experience with my 8th graders, right? It came out of watching people not be able to learn what they wanted to learn. It came out of that bout of depression. It came out of all of these things that just happened when they happened. So I don't wish that it happened earlier, but I fully recognize that it would be easier to do without children. 100%.
I disagree.
Yeah, bring it. What's that? Christopher, hey, yeah. Disagreement up front, those of you who choose.
I don't think the kids are constrained. If you're a single parent, if you're on your own solo, absolutely. If you're in a relationship where you make conscious decisions as to how you balance that, I think for the things that I've started, it's worked out exceptionally well. There are sacrifices and there are choices, but I don't think it's kind of an on-off, yes or no kind of experience.
And I totally agree with that in that I don't think any two entrepreneurs or families or sort of partnership dynamics and responsibilities with kids, like none of them are the same. So my experience may not be somebody else's experience. I fully agree with that. I fully recognize that. How about way in the back?
How do you keep the spirit of transparency alive in your company?
How do I keep the spirit of transparency alive?
Yeah, like amongst other employees, like that's a difficult thing. Some people don't want to share, that kind of deal. Like, how do you keep that going? I know you do it, but like, how do you get your employees to kind of like, hey, let's all share,
Yeah. So at the moment, the Skillery is just 3 people. It's me, and then it's Michaela in the back, and then it's Nicole, who's not here, who does all of our kind of public-facing social media blogging, all that kind of stuff. For Nicole, I think it's really easy because she loves the directive of be as transparent as you want. Like that's an easy thing to take into the social media world and the public-facing world. She loves that. It gives her a whole slew of stuff to talk about. She knows that nothing's off limits, so I think that's great for her. I don't want to speak for Michaela, but I imagine it's tough at times for Michaela. That's my assumption, is that it's tough for Michaela to balance the desire to make the Skillery look good, even when someone may be asking her a question and the honest answer doesn't. What I try to, I hope you know this, I'm always okay with the honest answer. I don't care if it loses business. I don't care if people turn around and walk out the door. I don't care if it means we have to kick people out because we made a bad call about them fitting in our community or something. That has happened. I want us to just be open and honest about the kind of business we want to run at all times. I don't know whether Michaela finds that constricting or liberating. You can ask her. She's totally right there with her hand over her mouth. But there's no fear of retribution is the Skillery for talking openly and honestly.
Last question.
Last question. Yes. Go ahead. There's someone over here.
Oh, me?
Hi.
Hey.
I was wondering, I've been a small business owner, owned several different businesses. I'm not now. I work for a very large company. But, you said that you picked up, or you're now working full-time. I'm sure that your children need health care and benefits, and you don't get that, on your own. It's very expensive. So what is your full-time gig now?
Yeah, so I work with a company that works out of the Skillery called Stoked. It's a company that operates out of a portion of our space, and over time I've just watched them and gotten to know them, and at some point they were like, hey, could you just help us like a couple hours a week with this little business thing we're struggling with? And I said, sure. And it kind of turned into a full-time thing. And that was a really important moment where I said, okay, someone just offered me a full-time job. Someone just offered me a salary, which I haven't had in a really long time. Do I want to take that, knowing that it essentially means I'm going to have a lot less time for the Skillery, my kids, et cetera, et cetera? Are the trade-offs worth it? I ultimately decided yes, but I think that has ramifications for my kids in the Skillery that I'm still struggling with. That doesn't happen to be where I get my health insurance from. My wife is employed as well, and so I do have that luxury of sort of relying on my wife and the particulars of her life. But the time was right when they offered me that job to say yes to that, and yes to some of the changes that meant, and now I have to figure out what does that mean for everything over here. Yeah?